Okay, this particular session is for newbies, i.e. those people who have not done educational supervision before and their first one is coming up. If you're worried about doing educational supervision because you haven't done before, then stop fretting. The skills you need to be a good educational supervisor aren't actually very different from the skills needed to be a good GP, and you already have those. There are basically 5 skills you need to use, and you may need to brush up on 1 or 2 of these. These are facilitation skills, feedback skills, communication skills, building a positive educational climate, and your person-centered skills to show that you value the person, which no doubt will build rapport. And here's a quick reminder about some of the important things to do when facilitating. I'll quickly go through these. When you're encouraging the trainee to appraise him or herself, encourage them to look at both good and weak areas. Beware, some trainees can be really self-critical. Start off with open questions and then, as the meeting progresses, become more focused, very much like a consultation. Encourage a two-way dialogue, and that means don't do all of the talking, but it also means not just sitting there and listening all the time. You're basically after a 50-50 contribution from both parties. When it comes to setting action plans, make sure you do these jointly with the trainee and make sure the type of plans that you set are achievable and realistic. And finally, watch for signs of distress or dysfunction in the trainee and tackle it early, usually by verbalising your thoughts and feelings and what you see with the trainee. This slide goes through some of the key points about feedback. You may wish to hit the pause button to read this in a bit more detail. And here are some things that you need to do before your educational supervision meeting. These things will help the meeting go more smoothly. And the one that I really want to focus on is the last one, making contact with the trainee and telling them what to prepare and bring. Trying to get the trainee to do as much of the legwork for educational supervision as possible is the key to making things easier for you. And that's totally fair because it is their e-portfolio. The more you get the trainee to do stuff for educational supervision before the meeting, the more free time you will have in the meeting to discuss things rather than get bogged down in the administration. Seriously, this definitely is the most important advice I can give you if you're after an easy and stressless way of doing educational supervision. Ignore it, and you ignore it at your own peril. Hit the pause button to read this in more detail, and you may wish to print it off. This is just a quick reminder that minimum numbers, as in the minimum number of CBDs and COTs, etc., are not the desired number nor the maximum number. They are simply the minimum number, and the trainee should be aiming to do more. So in other words, if they say to you, oh, I've done my 6 CBDs for the post, you should really be encouraging them to do a lot more. The more CBDs they do, the more evidence they have in their portfolio. And here are a final few points that I want you to remember. The first point is that you're going to be rusty the very first time you do educational supervision. And that's no surprise really, is it? I mean, the very first time you started to drive a car, you would have been rusty. But the important thing is point 2, you will get better with time. Just like now, you've probably been a driver for an X number of years and you don't even think about the skills involved in driving. We've talked about point 3 in the previous slide, which is getting your trainee to do as much of the work as possible. And the final point is really crucial. The more time you invest at the beginning, i.e. the ST1 stage and the ST2 stage of a trainee, creating the right climate, educating them, getting them to reflect, getting them to understand what reflection is, getting them to understand what feedback is, then the more dividends that will pay off in the end. As Gordon Ramsay would say, tips for newbies, done.